Let's talk to John Rentoul, chief political commentator at The Independent. He's been around almost as long as I have, so I'm sure he's been having a few of these conversations. Very good morning, John.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to see you. I mean, the Mail have picked up on something here, particularly because I know that we have these arguments all the time about whether political expenses are right and whether they're proper, whether people should claim them, who gets to have a second home and all of that. But, you know, to see the cabinet members who have so forcefully pushed through this withdrawal of the pensioners' sort of heating allowance in the winter, to see them claiming for their second homes the actual energy costs, particularly Ed Miliband, who doesn't think we should be using any energy at all. You know, it's pretty galling, isn't it?
No, it's not.
I knew you'd think it wasn't.
I mean, honestly, you know, I mean, I know I'm only here in order to enrage your...
That's not true.
Your viewers, and that you have me on and you ask me questions, and I usually agree with you, however right-wing you're being. But then you catch me out with something like MPs' expenses or MPs' pay. We need to pay MPs properly in order to get good people in politics.
When are we going to get any good people in politics? We haven't had any for a while. I mean, you know, it's a bit of a hollow argument, that, I'm afraid, given that.
Very good. But the idea that MPs should pay for their own travel because they represent, you know, far-flung parts of the country, and they have to come to Westminster.
I don't have a problem with them.
It's not like a normal PAYE.
No, I get that. I don't. But the voice note that we just heard is his view. That's not my view. I mean, I don't
agree with it.
I don't mind them. I don't mind them paying claiming for travel expenses. I don't have a problem with that at all if they're coming from far enough away. But I do.
Mike, you said you did agree with Jamie, and
I agree with
what you meant generally was that we should pay MPs less and they shouldn't be able to claim.
No. I agree with his principle that they shouldn't just be able to claim for everything. I think the system needs to be...
They can't claim for everything, can they?
They can claim for a lot more things.
Absurd.
Well, they can claim for a lot more things than they should, in my view. I don't think they should be able to claim a heating allowance for a second home. I just don't see why they should.
They've got to have... If you represent a constituency a long way from London, you need to live in two places.
Yeah, I get that. But let's look at Ed Miliband.
One of those places shouldn't be heated at any time.
I'm not saying it shouldn't be heated, but they shouldn't have carte blanche to claim, you know, thousands of pounds a year.
They don't have carte blanche to claim anything. They apparently
do. I don't know if you've seen the figures. I mean, I don't want to get too hung up on this because we've got other things to talk about. But the bottom line is that you've got somebody like Ed Miliband, right, who basically lives in London, right? He represents Doncaster North, so I dare say he's got to have some form of a house up there.
He does have a house in Doncaster North.
Yes, he does, but his family lives in London with him, right? So now he's presumably claiming the £1,100 and 37 pence that he's claimed for last year for Doncaster North. Now, you call me old-fashioned.
That doesn't sound like a huge amount for a small
but it adds up. It adds up. You know, Liz Kendall, 2,400. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor,
because they've got to have two houses,
who won't let you claim your, you know, pensioners' winter fuel allowance, is claiming 1,186 quid for her energy allowance. I just don't think it's fair. And most people, right-minded thinking people who are not in the Westminster bubble, agree with me.
Right, so MPs can have two houses as long as one of them is unheated.
No, I don't think they should have two. I don't think they should have two houses.
No, you're talking nonsense. Next story.
I don't think they should have two houses. All right, next story is that Keir Starmer is thought by more than 50% of the population to be taking the country in the wrong direction, and I agree with them.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, Keir Starmer was already fairly unpopular when he became Prime Minister. He had a very short...
No, he had a 16-point approval rating, which is not bad.
Very briefly, immediately after the election.
Yeah, because as soon as he got into power, he started screwing things up, but now he's zero.
Well, he reverted to roughly where he was. He's actually the most popular politician in Britain today, Mike.
What does that tell you?
Well, it tells you that people are very cynical and hate politics and hate politicians, and it's largely because people like you go around encouraging them.
Oh, it's my fault now, is it? I love this. I mean, come and lock me up. You know, I'm ready for you. Come and get the handcuffs out for me preaching hate on Talk TV. That's what I get paid for, right? No, the thing is, most people in this country do not believe in the system anymore. They think they've been let down.
They believe in what system? Democracy.
They don't believe in the governmental system that we have in this country. We've had 14 years of a pretty dreadful... Well, the government doesn't work, frankly. We've had 14 years of a government that didn't work. We've now had 7 weeks of government that doesn't work. And quite frankly, some of the things that they now want to do will make them even more unpopular. You know, they want to make it possible for people to claim compensation because somebody rings them outside of working hours. I mean, for God's sake, they wanted to have a new definition of Islamophobia, of, you know, misogyny, but they can't tell you what a woman is. How are they going to manage that?
Yeah, well, they're doing some things that you disagree with, Mike, yes.
They're doing lots of things that a lot of people disagree with because they didn't say they were going to do them. They said they weren't going to do away with the pensioners' heating allowance, but then they did it. It was the first thing they did.
Yeah, they've had to take some very tough decisions because they've inherited a very difficult...
No, but they haven't, though, because it now turns out Rachel Reeves banging on about how terrible the economy is. It turns out it's not terrible, actually. The economy is nowhere near as bad as she's been making it out to be.
The economy's not doing too well. It's not great, but the
well, it's doing better than any other nation in the G7, John.
Yes, the government's finances are in a terrible state, and we knew that before the election, and it's even worse than we thought.
That's why they're giving so much money away to the unions, because we haven't got any.
Some very tough decisions have to be made. No, well, I agree that the settlements with the unions have been wrong. And they should have been tied to changes in working practices and promises of reform. That, you know, giving that pay rise to rail workers and to doctors without any strings attached, I think was a big mistake.
It was madness. And within hours, literally, of Ms. Haig announcing that she'd done this great deal with ASLEF, the ASLEF drivers of LNER immediately announced they were still going to go on strike anyway.
Absolutely brilliant. I mean, a brilliant PR strategy in order to win support for the trade union movement and the Labour government. I mean, I cannot believe what these people are up to.
I mean, it's so incompetent of the government, though, isn't it? Does it not show you that they have not only not got a clue about how to negotiate, but they've literally had the ASLEF union and Mick Whelan run rings round them?
Well, I think it's a strategic error. I mean, it is very much like what I mean. I don't want to give away my age here, but it's very much like what Margaret Thatcher did when she became Prime Minister in 1979. She agreed to a huge pay rise for all public sector workers, which triggered inflation again and meant that she had a great economic crisis in her early years, which she only recovered from in time for the 1983 election.
Although, of course, some would say that she created that deliberately so that she knew that would then kibosh the unions at once and for all, because that's what she then did.
Well, it's a strange way of kiboshing the unions is to give them a huge pay rise right at the start. I mean, it was an act of weakness, and it is tragic to see a Labour government falling into the same trap.
Yeah, well, that was a very long time ago, and you may be old enough to remember it. Most of the people listening to this don't remember it, but I'll tell you what they do know is that 213 MPs, half of those MPs from the Labour Party who are currently in Parliament, have raked in £1.8 million in donations from unions since the election was called. So that may be a clue as to why they've done it.
Well, no, I don't think. I doubt it, to be honest. I think it's a political miscalculation. I think the government was very keen to get the strikes sorted out. I mean, especially the junior doctors' strike. I mean, that had to be settled.
Yeah, but they haven't settled anything, because they're going to go back out on strike again next April. They've just told us they're going to do that, and it's also led to the GPs in this country now going on strike because they want even more.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly the problem with settling so generously, is you encourage all the other public sector workers to put in their claims. And that's exactly what happened to Margaret Thatcher with the...
But how is it that you know that, John? I know it, and everybody listening to this and watching it knows it, but they do it anyway. They can't be that stupid, can they?
Well, they're under very difficult pressures. I mean,
how do you explain them giving all this money away in such a useless and terribly and careless manner, which has allowed the unions to be even more empowered and to say, well, we'll just do what we like?
Well, it's a misjudgment, isn't it? I mean, I think they were very keen to settle. They're very keen to settle those strikes, and I'm glad they.
But they haven't. ASLEF are going to go on strike every weekend between now and Christmas.
Well, on LNER, yes, but I mean,
even though they're now getting 81 grand for a 4-day week.
The rest of us, well, I completely agree, but the rest of ASLEF have gone back to will be back at work normally. So
back to work normally, which means the trains won't be running very well anyway, right? I mean, to be honest, at least when they're on strike, you know that you can't take the train. when they're not on strike, that's when it's become a problem, because you don't know whether the train's actually going to run or not. What about this emergency measures they've gone into this morning, Operation Early Dawn, right? Because they want to lock up a load of people who they haven't got room for. They're going to let out a load of other people who, it was just explained to me, are going to have nowhere to go. They're going to wander about. Some of them might become homeless because basically they won't be able to get a job. They won't be able to claim benefits for a month. There's no halfway house to put them in. You know, so at the end of the day, it's all very well to release them. And if any of them, God forbid, commit any serious crimes, you know, Starmer's going to be in a big pot of trouble.
Yeah. No, I mean, this was the puzzle right at the start of the riots in Southport that spread elsewhere. Was the government having said that the situation in the prisons was absolutely critical, suddenly decided that it wasn't critical anymore. They'd got hundreds of places for these rioters who've been arrested. It looks as if you know, we've now hit reality in the north at least, and they're going to have to activate the early release scheme early. I mean the thing is, the early release scheme,
an early release scheme.
When the Justice Secretary announced it straight away after the election, right. There was something sort of slightly strange about it, because she said it's an emergency, but I'm not actually going to start this scheme until September to give people time to get ready for it.
It's a bit like the climate emergency. It's not really an emergency.
Well, that's stretching the analogy a bit too far, Mike.
Well, I mean, they call it that, but it isn't, clearly, because we're not worried about it. But listen, talk about Sue Gray for me for a second, because even Dan Hodges, you know, your esteemed colleague at the Mail on Sunday, wrote a piece at the weekend saying Starmer has to sack Sue Gray before she wrecks his government. And, you know, there's obviously an awful lot of people very unhappy with the way she's conducting herself.
It's a slightly strange column from my good friend and colleague, Dan Hodges, because I mean, it's this whole thing about you know, calling for the King's advisors to be dismissed. The thing is, Keir Starmer appointed Sue Gray, and everything Sue Gray does is because Keir Starmer wants it done, and so to call for Sue Gray to be sacked is in effect to say that Keir Starmer's got it wrong and he should go. Well,
exactly. Well, now you've finally got to the point I was trying to get you to, so we'll just clip that up and send it round to Downing Street in about 10 minutes. You know, John Rentoul calls for Keir Starmer to go. Simple.
Yeah, but he's just been elected. So that is a slightly strange.
Yes, but there's clearly trouble. There's clearly trouble at mill, as they say. You know.
But there's always trouble at the mill.
What's his name? Mick Sweeney's not happy. You're right, and he's the architect of the new Labour project. So he will have to be listened to, and he will have to have his sort of day in court, as it were, with Sue Gray. And the two of them can't stay at the top of the party, clearly.
Well, there's clearly something going on. You're right, but there are always tensions at the top of government, and let's see how this pans out. I mean, I suspect it. I mean, the last time I thought there wasn't anything serious going on was when people were writing stories about how Tony Blair and Gordon Brown were at each other's throats, and that was before they even got elected. Right. So goodness knows how bad things are behind the scenes this time.
I think they're pretty bad. But anyway, listen, as ever, John, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. John Rentoul there, trying his best to defend the Labour Party's policies and the Labour Party's record at the moment, which apparently more than 50% of the country think is taking us in the wrong direction.